Hey guys, this is Alpha Yang with Top Tier Cheers, and with me as always is Thomas Sim.
Hello.
We've got a very interesting cast today. It's one that I think really should have been done by somebody at some point sooner, and I have seen people touch on the concept, but mostly in a rules context. Uh, but we're going to be talking about events, the not the physical events where you go to compete, but rather the card category in White Shorts. Before we get to that, however, how have things been, Tom?
Uh, things have been fine. Parents are in the middle of like moving out, so getting ready to just transition to like you know, uh,
Solo life
paying the
or
bill, like solo life, paying the bills on my own, etc., stuff like that. It's gonna be a little bit of an adjustment. Um,
uh, once you've set up auto payments and stuff, it really isn't that big a change.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
you'll be okay.
yeah. But it's just like a bunch of paperwork and stuff. I got
Yeah.
rear-ended earlier this week. My car was like I wasn't even in the car. I was parked, and someone rear-ended my car like right in front of me as I was walking out the door to my shop
Jesus.
challenge.
You're okay though, right?
I am okay. I mean, I wasn't in the car, so it's like
Uh,
like how do you
well,
rear end somebody who's just parked there? But yeah, I did win my shop
um,
challenge. Got my buy card.
y- very good. Where are you going to use it?
California, probably. I'm not gonna go to Toronto, so which is the
No,
last North American event.
makes sense.
Definitely not going to
Toronto's
Mexico or Puerto Rico. So
not easy to get in or get out unless you fly. Hey,
yeah,
that's fair enough. I didn't know Puerto Rico was having one. That's cool.
they do.
That is very cool. I'd like to visit someday. Uh,
Uh,
I don't have much in terms of news on my end. In fact, I have not had the chance to play a Weiss card in a little while. I've played a bunch of the new Magic set, which is it's fine. It's not an all-timer, but it's fine. Um and I might go and play tomorrow with a friend of mine, but yeah, I haven't got much else to add really. It just so happens that my local what do you even call them? BCS or what are they called? The English ones?
uh, what do you mean, like the
You know, is
tournaments?
yeah, the tournament. Is it a Springfest? Is it BCS? I don't know
It's
what it's
BCS. It's
called.
BCS.
Oh, it's
Bushiro
BCS.
Championship. Bushiro Championship Series.
So the cool thing is that my city or my town, whatever you want to call it, Melbourne in Australia, has finally well, they've confirmed theirs for this year, which we were all expecting, which is a good thing. The unfortunate part is, well, firstly, it's on a Friday because it's always on a Friday because I I I just don't know why it's on a Friday. It doesn't make sense to me. That's neither here nor there, whatever. The other unfortunate thing is it falls exactly on my annual leave, which I hope to be spending not in Australia, but rather in America, which just to visit friends and family. So
Very
that's cool.
exciting.
Yeah, it means I don't really have to prepare I mean, I have a deck prepared. I have multiple decks prepared if I wanted. I've decided that if I'm going to play a deck, it'll be either Dunmachi or it'll be 8 Door Quints. I don't know what AOT is going to be like. I'm relying on my good friend Riaz to give me the lowdown on what is good and what is bad in AOT. He is testing that set fairly feverishly. So,
I've heard Ape Pants is
well,
pretty good. You know,
yeah, I've heard good things about most of the pants related combinations. I've heard bad things about Choice Door. I've heard the Errand finisher is not particularly good. It just doesn't pan out well. So yeah, there's a few different things to look at. But yeah, AOT 3 is out and people are testing, and it seems to be the prevailing opinion that it is a competent but not broken set. And in breaking news, quite literally as we were preparing the slides and the discussion around this cast, the English ban list has been announced. Uh, we have had a unlimit and a limit. The limit is a port of the Japanese Mushoku Tensei limit, where the tap counter and Tutu Gilane have been put on the list, making MTI significantly weaker in the late game. And the unlimit, which is a really cool one. It's not one that's really been done in. Japanese either, is Kaguya has been taken off the list somewhat. It's had its best level 0k unrestricted, so now you can run the old deck minus Riki, which is a big blow. Like that is actually meaningful, but the deck is now infinitely more viable. I think that's really cool.
Yes,
Uh,
you could argue it probably should have happened
a while, or
a while
it
ago.
shouldn't have happened. Like the ban should never have happened, in my opinion. There just was no indication that Kaguya needed to be banned at all, if you ask me. It wasn't putting up good results. It was regarded very highly, but that didn't stop it from lagging behind MTI and Data Live and Hololive. It just doesn't have the results to match its very severe banning. So, yeah, well, here we are, I guess. Anyway, that's news and wise for this week. Let's get to our main topic, which is event cards. So, card games in general always have a few different categories of cards because if you have nothing but like character cards, then the gameplay does tend to get quite simplifiable, or simplistic might be another word, or quite stale. There are games which do have this sort of thing, such as, for example, Cardfight Vanguard. But in Vanguard, they make cards usable in other different ways. For example, you can discard them uh, in order to provide extra power rather than just playing them as characters. Uh, all good card games have some degree of versatility in their cards, whether it be card type or multifunctional cards, and Weiss is no different. We have characters, the backbone of every deck, usually 35 plus cards in your deck of characters. We have climaxes, which are a necessity in every single deck. You've got 8 climaxes in every deck. And then the last portion is an optional portion. We have a non-character function in event cards. Uh, what do you think of event cards, Tom?
Um,
Be just say what you were saying before, man.
I think they just suck for the most part.
Yeah, more or
Uh,
less.
they kind of they're what is it? I think they suck. Rather, there's a period of the game where basically, since they just kind of suck, they need more help than other kinds of cards, which I think Bushiroad recognizes. And when they do print events that are meant to be used like functionally by players, I think they usually take care to package those events with certain, printed synergies like a climax combo that retrieves the event or something, or something of that sort.
Or
That's about it. Yeah.
or they at least make the climax combo, or rather the event, non-intrusive to the rest of the deck. So they
Yes.
make it so your primary advantage combo can also grab the specified event, or if you are top checking, and it'll check not just for the trait, but or the color or level, but also for the event. It's a really ham-fisted way of doing things, but I mean, it is what it is. How that's just how it is. There's not much to say there.
That being said, I
But
do think there are compelling reasons to play events. Um, I mean,
yeah, and we'll definitely
this slide I'm showing right
we'll
now
come there.
covers like the reasons, like maybe like the kind of like the central the abstract core themes behind running events. Namely, events often have more creative power budgeting and more creative like combinations of effects than characters,
Hmm.
and events don't take a slot on board to give you access to certain functions that usually require characters, like searching a card, for example, or
Yeah,
salvaging a
like
card.
in the most simplistic term, when you play a card, uh, if you play a character, you get a character on stage, and that character, some characters just immediately sacrifice themselves to do something, and in that instance, they're mimicking events. But the important thing is, most cards work with character cards. You can salvage them, you can search them, you can, also all sorts of things are related to character cards. All of the Rize effects are related to character cards. Drop searching is related to character cards. Choice, door, all of these climax triggers get you characters. They don't get events, which fundamentally makes events both more narrow and harder to work with.
Mhm.
So if an event is to be played, it has to be really good. And let's start talking about why events would be good or playable.
Sure,
Yeah.
yeah. We can
So the
start
first
with
thing we should talk yeah,
yeah.
let's talk about the first reason events are good, which is functionality. They need to serve a very good purpose and they need to do something meaningful in the game. So on the screen, we've got a card called Pionkichi from the Danmachi series. This is probably the single strongest event in the game, in the meta decks in English right now. And I do know that there are other events in the game. I know that, for example, Mushoku has their pendants, Quince has their minus soul counter. Some slime decks have events. AOT has move gear. I think that Pionkichi right now, in terms of straight up function and straight up purpose in the game, is better than all of those right now. So if you're following along via audio, or if you are, you don't want to read or it's tabbed out or whatever, I'll read the event. It's a 1/1 red event in Danmachi where it says choose a character with what the Danmachi traits in your waiting room, add it to your hand. Then give one of your character with the Danmachi traits 4,000 power for the turn. 4,000 is a lot of power. Like, to contrast this, in the very first set of White Shorts, we had a 1/1 red event called Tatsumi East Police Box. It was all it read was salvage a character from your waiting room. That's all it did. This is the same cost. This is the same color, all of that, but you get 4,000 power. 4,000 is a lot at any point in the game. And it allows Danmachi to easily punch over anything in its way as long as you have this event. But more to the point, Danmachi actually has a 1/0 character. It's a wealth that reduces the cost of this event to 0. And when that is factored in, Pionkichi as a 1/0 event that salvages any character from your bin and also gives 4k to something is monstrously powerful. It is probably the strongest event we've seen in a long time in terms of just pure, unadulterated efficiency. And a
4K
card
power
like
is
this,
huge.
yeah, it's
Um,
just so much. Like, think about the power scaling. Like, think about this in a normal set, not even Dunmachi, because Dunmachi swings regularly with like 1/0 10Ks for with no effort. Think of it in like a say, I don't know, Ruby or something like Slime. Getting your 6 and 7K cards to 11Ks, so your 1/0s now contest level 3 early plays. That's insane. That's crazy. And to say nothing of standby cards. If you've got enough power behind your 1/0s, you can now punch over standby 2/2s with no issue, and that's, I mean, you know how strong that is, right?
yeah. The 4K power is a huge. I mean, as you said, the 4K power is like a huge reason to play this card. Uh, and the comparison to like say a drop salvager, like the drop salvager isn't going to reverse anything meaningful. It's not going to help. It's not usually going to help your other characters like reverse like really important cards, whereas Pionkichi will. Um, and that goes back to the idea that Pionkichi is not a character on board that has to be attacked with or otherwise utilized to get value from. It just is a card that you know,
It arguably is a character on board because of
kind
what it
of,
does.
kind of. It's
It's like,
like, I mean, we're like that's like we're talking about like we're getting into like
so
some interesting theory there, but like
yeah, it's
straight
really
up,
simplified theory. But if you want
if
to
you
look at it in the simplest form, this card reads salvage a character and then win a lane.
yeah, basically, which a drop salvager does not usually.
The drop salvager will get you the character, but not only will it cost you a card, sorry, not a card, not only will it cost you a stock in most instances, but you often lose a lane because of that. You need to have either won a lane on defense or be prepared to lose that lane, whereas Pionkichi is the opposite. It's like, while it is unsearchable, unsalvageable, and okay, in Danmachi it's a little different. It is actually salvageable in Danmachi, but we don't, let's ignore that. Aside from not being searchable or salvageable, this is everything a drop searcher should have been in terms of tempo, which is really good. So yeah, that's Pyonkichi. I personally think it is the single strongest. I don't think it's necessarily the best of it, but I think that in terms of raw power for its cost, it is pound for pound the strongest event in Weiss right now. There are cards with stronger effects, like the
Oh
realizer
shoot.
events and stuff, or money counter in SAO. I think those are stronger effects. But I think in terms of power for value, Chonkichi smashes all of them. It's such a stupid card.
Oh, 1 second. Give me a sec while I fix.
The slideshow.
Yeah, I need to.
Yeah.
I forgot the text for the Roxy event.
Oh.
We
So the
can.
next card would, well, we can start talking about it anyway. It's the
Yeah. So the next card.
Mushoku Pendant, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let
So I'll let you read that one out.
me.
It's a little bit more complex than a little bit more
I mean,
complex. So I'll let
right,
you read
right.
that one.
So it's a 1-0 event. If you don't have a Roxy, which is a character in Mushoku Tensei, and name on board, you can't play this hand. Pretty fake condition because your main brainstorm is a Roxy. Uh, but a meaningful one nonetheless because it needs to be on the board. So when you play the event, you search your deck for up to one, on trait character, add it to your hand, and then if you did so, you discard a card, and then you send this event to memory, and then when you level up and this card is in your memory, you can send the card from memory to waiting room to search for an on-trait character and add it to your hand. And the reason why this is here is to serve as like a foil to Kyonkichi, not only in terms of the fact that it's a searching characters versus salvaging them, but also in terms of so whereas Pyonkichi is an event that makes your board better, this Roxy event, this Mushoku event, is a card that just gives you more selection. So it's like additional selection on top of the initial search.
It makes your hand and to some extent your waiting room much
Yes.
stronger.
Mm-hmm.
So the obvious the obvious benefit of this is that you sculpt a card immediately, and in the 1k 1 soul decks, that usually means your 1-0 combo, or it could be something strong like an early play. But then when you level up, and I mean, you're going to level up, that's going to happen at some point, right? You will break even back on cards, and you will get another card to your hand. The timing can be a bit awkward, but this is a very powerful card. You were saying?
Oh, I was just gonna say if we compare this to a drop searcher, like we compared Pyonkichi to a drop salvager, I mean, the clear difference between this and a drop searcher is that this searches 2 cards and a drop searcher searches 1 card. On top of the fact that this is an event and not a character that you are playing, but
This card, unlike, well, Pyonki, I mean, Danmachi only really has one good deck, but Mushoku Tensei has multiple viable decks, and this card is used in, well, it's usable in all of them. Why would this card be good in standby?
well, it it allows you. Well, this card specifically allows you to search a target for standby and then ditch it
Immediately
immediately.
ditch.
So
Yeah,
basically, it turns your deck. It
it in
like
tune.
it's
It
like
gets you whatever you want from your
it's like
deck.
Yu-Gi-Oh. It's like Yu-Gi-Oh. So you know how people in Yu-Gi-Oh say stuff like your waiting room is your hand. In standby decks, that effect is kind of that tenet kind of holds true. Because you are utilizing your waiting room to effectively play cards to the board. So in standby decks, the waiting room can effectively be considered part of your hand. So you know, I think a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh players
For
refer
the
to
Yu-Gi-Oh,
this. Oh, sure, yeah.
this is,
If you want to
yeah, I mean,
clarify,
for the Yu-Gi-Oh players, this is literally the card Foolish Burial
yeah,
with
basically,
extra benefits.
yeah.
For the Magic players, it's the card Entomb, which is probably the single strongest reanimator card ever printed. So yeah, that is one function. It also serves as a discard outlet. It also lets you, for example, if you have a 2/2 in your hand already and you just want to get, say, a counter or something from your deck, you can get that card and then discard the 2/2. So it's stronger than Entomb or Foolish Burial in that it can be those cards, but it can do so much more. And another thing that Tom touched on, which is a really powerful thing, this was not in the example cards, but prior to all of that, this doesn't take a space on board. So, as opposed to a drop searcher in a standby deck, which would be an undesirable card to have to play onto the board, you can just play this and it'll get the card you want, and it won't clog up your board with a weak 2k power attacker, which is
Hmm.
really useful. So those are two examples of strong function in decks that can't just be replaced with a drop salvage or a drop searcher. And remember, we are constantly comparing these to the character equivalents because we need to know why we play these over the character versions.
Yep. And then we move on to what I think Alf refers to as efficiency, as like
Yes,
another core reason to play events.
yes. So when I say efficiency, what I mean is um events don't cost you anything to play if you draw them. And the stereotypical example of this would be a card like Chihaya's Camera from IMAS, or more relevantly, Hestia Knife in Danmachi, another Danmachi event, because that's the event deck for whatever reason. Goblin Slayer's Torch is very similar. Quint has a very similar card. Lots of sets have a very similar card. I'll read the card anyway. So there's a lot of flavor text on Hestia Knife, but all you have to know about it is that it's a 1/0 event, which reads, look at up to 4 cards from the top of your deck, search for up to 1 character with the relevant traits, reveal it, add it to hand, ditch the rest. Hestia Knife and Torch specifically can be played on Counter Step, which has ups and downs. It's obviously just a plus because it's added text. It doesn't detract from the effect in any way, but it lets you mill 4, and more importantly, if you ever draw this past level 1, this represents the best character in your top 4 cards at baseline level. If you're really hell-bent on not milling totally, then this is the top character of your deck. This, at the very least, gives you that level of selectivity, which is why there is almost no opportunity cost to running a card like this. It will replace itself immediately. It doesn't cost any stock. It has color requirement, which can be awkward for some decks, but typically it's fine. And something else that's important, the first deck that you want to mill through is cut down significantly if you play a card like this. Um, I mean, that's really what I want to say. If it costs 0, if it replaces itself immediately, then that's really efficient. That just means you are never really screwed over by having this card in your deck because it immediately becomes a character which can be played for value. You're
Hmm.
never going to be stuck with an event in your hand that just does nothing. Um, so yeah, there's another thing we do want to think about when it comes to events, which is doing something that characters. Oh, sorry. Let's go back to camera for a sec because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
let's just touch very briefly on camera versus Azusa, which is a very
Aha.
strong profile. So there are cards that just come into play in mill cards, and sometimes you can do the camera effect when it is literal Azusa. You get to check the top number of cards, add a character there, and you discard a card either before or after, whatever. The difference between this and Azusa is basically that you can't search these easily, usually. Like, if you're running a deck that doesn't literally get these from your deck or waiting room, such as Danmachi, such as Goblin Slayer, then you can't get these on command. The reason Azusa is so strong is partially because you can just get Azusa with pretty much any search or salvage, which means that you have access to milling basically at any time. The reason we use Hestia Knife is because in Danmachi, you're probably expected to play something like probably 6 plus Hestia knives every game. If I'm to give a very conservative estimate, I've definitely played more. I played
6.
more than double
Yeah.
that.
That sounds, I mean, that sounds like a lot because it is, but like
The
we'll
thing is,
talk
the
we'll,
climax combo in
yeah, yeah, we'll talk about that in depth later, but basically the climax combo gets you this event back in hand
yes,
from anywhere. So,
and and when you're playing an event like this that many times, if you compare it to playing Azusa that many times, and there are decks that do that. For example, pre-ban Fate would frequently play Azusa many, many times in order to mill the deck down. That deck gave up so many lanes throughout the game. Danmachi will never do that. Not only is that baked into the structure of the deck, but this card doesn't take up a slot on board, and you just don't have to commit to field until you've played your Hestia Knife, which is really, really strong. Anyway, that's kind of what I want to say. Azza and this card are both strong in their own right. Azza is generically better, but if you have enough of an engine to get plenty of these plays every game, then Hestia Knife is really, really strong.
Right. And one thing I would like to know is that some people notice this card and the previous card don't cost stock at all. Some events, especially modern events, often will represent multiples, like one or more of these, like combinations of these elements, to justify being run in decks now, mainly because they have to. But like, for example, you could also say this event from Mushoku is kind of an example of a card that is very efficient and that is always playable for the most part.
Yeah, at the very
just wanted to clear
won't
that
break
up.
even immediately. Won't
Yeah.
break even immediately because you actually do have to go -1 to play the Mushoku Pendant, but you will get there eventually.
Yeah.
And that matters because over the course of the game, and the game will progress, you will break even, and there's basically no cost to playing it, which is really
Mhm.
good. All right,
And then
let's
the
move on
final
to the next
category
part.
events are just like,
Yeah, we've been comparing to characters all this time, but some events do things that characters cannot do. This particular event is kind of a middling example because people might argue that tap counters do a similar thing. I don't really agree because tap counters are highly inefficient, and these events you can frequently plan to play multiple game if that's what you need to do. I'll read the event. Sorry,
uh, well,
I'm coming from an LB standpoint. I'm not
fair
coming from a
enough.
Quint standpoint. So, this card, Precious, like Precious Treasure or whatever it's called, it's a 2/3 red event in Quint that reads counter, choose an opponent's character. That character gets -3 soul for the turn. It's a powerful defensive counter that allows you to not take damage sometimes. It's just a strong event. You are making one lane not take any damage, and doing so, you push the game towards being slower and grindier, which is something that a deck like 8 Standby Quints really appreciates. In addition, you can just use this to nullify one lane completely, like a Perfect or Null Guard in Vanguard, or a Fog effect in Magic, and that will basically guarantee that that attack is not one you have to worry about. There are caveats to that, but you can think of it as just removing one attack.
Of
And it costs a lot of
note,
stock. Yep, go on.
well, of note specifically, especially compared to tap counters, this particular event is a little harder to play around. Um, Mainly because, I mean, with tap
Tap
counters, you
counters
only
have
need to,
requirements.
yeah, you only really need to avoid the tap counter for 2 attacks, for the first 2 attacks. Whereas if you want to play around this card or events similar to this, you really need to play around every single attack being counterproof if you want to avoid this event being used.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a very strong event. It was part of Quint's endgame plan. You would do this, and you get a strong buffer in the mid or late game. And similar events have defined decks throughout history, really, ranging from, well, we can talk about them later, but basically, when events are powerful and have defensive effects like this, or healing effects, or even some aggressive effects that characters can't do, then yeah, we consider them because they do something unique that nothing else in that set or even in the game can really replicate.
hmm
Okay.
And then
Um,
one
here's
final
a good
example
example.
that is not
Yes.
defensive. Um, and this card, Milo Lashido, a lot of people might recognize it. It's
Mildly offensive.
currently,
It is on
yeah,
the Japanese ban list,
it
but
is
is
on the
not on the
yeah.
English ban list.
hmm I think this card is special because it kind of violates a lot of like power budget. Like if you tried to put all this stuff on a character, it just wouldn't work. Like there's just not enough power. But since this is an event, I mean, like
You don't need to budget for power.
they don't really need to budget for power, and that's the reason why this event can do so many different things. If like even albeit you can only choose one of 3 effects, but modal effects are pretty good. I feel like I don't know if many people disagree with that.
As long as
Especially,
it's not intrusive or and all the
yeah,
modes are actually relevant,
yeah,
then
which
yeah.
they are on this card.
Mhm.
Uh,
'Cause at the let's talk about the event very briefly. So, it's a 1-0 event. Maybe the worst part of this event is that you have to tap one of your standing characters. But after that, you get one of 3 effects. Either you get the camera effect we talked about earlier, check top 4, add character to your hand, and then mill the rest. You can salvage a level 3 or higher character from your waiting room, or you can choose one of your opponent's level 1 or higher characters. They choose a character 1 level lower in their waiting room, and then those characters swap. So this is like a wall breaker type card where you
mhm.
can get rid of their 2/2, and they replace it with like a 1/1/7/5 or whatever in standby.
Uh,
Uh,
or back row, like you can send their
yes, you
assist in
can
the
hit
back row
back
to
row.
the waiting room too. Yeah.
So, yeah, there's 3 very, very relevant effects. If you draw this end game, then you can just salvage a level 3 for usually. If
Right.
you, have this in first deck, you get to mill through your deck a little quicker, and you get a little bit of selectivity. Like, this card is never terrible as long as there are no other issues like the tapping effect. And then the, board breaker effect. So, while the board breaking effect is the strongest one, the fact that it has other relevant lines of text means that you can play this and still have it be relevant in non-board based matchups, which is really, really good for a card that has a quote unquote unique effect.
Right. And this is something that a character cannot do for you. Well, I
Yeah,
say
they
that, I
can,
say
but they
that,
they
I
won't
say that, but yeah, they won't. Yeah. This is like a very unique combination of effects. We probably will not see a character that is able
with
to
all of
do all
these.
these things. Yeah.
We have characters that obviously we have characters that do one of these things. For example, any character that's any Ursa will do the top 4 thing. Any Salvage Brainstorm can do the bottom thing. Uh, and there are characters, usually 1/0s or higher, that do the board breaking swap thing.
Right.
But those cards are often pretty dead in some matchups because they just don't do anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you want to talk about other board breaking type cards, like the ones that come into play and then give neg 4K to one of your opponent's characters or whatever, those usually have to give up a lane as well. Whereas
Yep.
this does not.
Mm-hmm.
So it's because of that combination that My Little Shido is an overspec card, and because and that's why it would be worth considering playing. It happened that Data Live just didn't really want to play much yellow for this and had other ways to deal with boards and standby. But I think that this card in any other deck, as long as it's on color and doesn't the tapper character thing isn't too bad, would be extremely powerful.
I agree.
Sure. So, with that out of the way, events need to have function, they need to ideally be efficient, or they need to have a really unique function, or you can have all those together. There are cards like Xylophone Fortune Telling in DC, which combine all 3 of those, for example. Those are reasons why you might want to play events. We can give examples of events throughout the history of Weiss and why they were played. So, yeah, at the very beginning. Weiss was a very new game. Salvage brainstorms basically did not exist. You didn't have any selectivity aside from climax triggers, and characters had very weak power lines. If you got to 10k on defense without a counter, you were probably pretty broken at this point in time. At this point in time, events did one of a few things. The first is they did wild, wacky, ridiculous nonsense. This is like um, something that you would never never see today anymore.
I mean,
Examples, yeah,
custom,
go on.
like, custom set level
Yeah,
events, I guess. It's like,
yeah. Like these are events which are going back to what we were saying earlier. These events are unique. They aren't necessarily good, but they're very unique. Examples would include there's Neo Featherman R from Persona 3, which is a level 3 yellow event that costs 6 stock, I think. Is it 6 or 5? Costs a lot of stock, but what it reads is return all characters to hand, all both yours and your opponent's. That's all it does. And it's level 3 when that's like not the point where it would matter in Modern Weiss. The funny thing about that event is that it actually briefly saw some play when people were experimenting with Persona 5 again, because Persona is Neo with Persona 5. Persona 3, Persona 5, then Neo. So if you do use that event and you have like a billion stock, you are guaranteed Joker burns, but that doesn't mean this event is any good. Now, some of those events are bad, but some of them are really good. An example would include the Jack Frost event. Oh, we've got some
Oh,
examples. It's Xylophone. So let's talk about the more bad events because I like talking about bad
sure,
events.
we can talk more
Uh,
about events.
this is what's it called?
Armageddon.
Harum. Oh yeah, it's Armageddon. We talked about this in the flavor episode, but basically, pay 7, you kill everything in the front row with less than 10k power. Characters got to 10k very quickly, very shortly after this was printed. So this became completely unusable. But even then, board wipes in Weiss. That's so weird. This isn't Magic with their Wrath of Gods. This isn't Yu-Gi-Oh with their Dark Holes and Lightning Vortexes. This is
Raigeki.
Weiss. There's no board wipes. Yeah, like Raigeki. This is Weiss. There's no board wipes. Well, actually, there are, and they're not very good. That's why you never see them. They cost too much. They don't do enough, and they in not good sets. Um, so yeah, those are some early bad events. We've got early good events too. So the next card we'll talk about, I think, is Xylophone Fortune Telling, which I alluded to briefly earlier. It's a 2/2 blue event from DC, which just reads choose up to 2 cards in your clock and put them into waiting room. So you heal 2, and it's not heal the 2 top cards of your deck. It's just heal any 2. Um, is
Oh,
We're still
sorry.
stuck on Armageddon. Yep, sorry.
Sorry.
So you just yeah, you heal any 2 cards from the top of your deck, and then you send Xylophone Fortune Telling to memory. The reason why this is nuts is back then, and you probably won't believe me, but alarm was actually a relevant effect, which means if you had an alarm card stuck in clock, you could heal around the alarm card until alarm was on the top of your deck. Sorry, on the top of your clock, at which point it would have its effect active and you still get to heal 2. Not to mention, this is just pay 2, heal 2. That's insane, even by these days standards. If Xylophone Fortune Telling was in a modern set and it was a defensive deck, you'd play it. Uh, do you disagree? I think this card is really strong.
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah.
I mean, like, again, if we compare this to a regular healer, sure, like, healer bodies are usually more valuable than regular character bodies, but, like, healing 2 for 2 stock is pretty good. It's very good value. Like, you usually have to pay 2 to play a character that heals. So, and you certainly don't get to choose any cards in your clock to go to the waiting room. So, like, uh, yeah, I
It
mean,
is good. It is
do
really good.
I think this card would be played if we're in a set that was actually good? Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the memory bit is just kind of like flavor text. You don't expect it to count for much, but it is one more card of compression, I guess. It's just the whole idea was so you couldn't play this infinitely and drag the game out forever and ever. But that's not how Weiss works. So the memory bit is honestly more upside than downside.
This being conditionless too is just icing on the cake. I think like you can just play this whenever. Um, you can play this like you can save this until after you refresh because like a typical weakness of healing at level 2 is that you kind of put cards back into your waiting room and then they go back into your next deck. But like, and that's relevant because a lot of early play healers at level 2 have certain conditions that require you to play them at certain times. This having no condition at all is pretty good. I mean, no condition besides the color, of course, but
Yeah, it's really strong. It
yeah.
saw heaps and heaps of play, and it was eventually limited because of that. We can talk about why later, but like it has to do with another alarm card. But it's really
Mm-hmm.
strong. That's all you
Yep.
need to know. All right. So after the initial era of Weiss, where events were just kind of like bad tutors or hilariously bad or hilariously good, um, we got to the point where events started being engine type cards. They actually were really powerful and you not only wanted them as like your payoff, but they were also part of your mid game as well. Let's go back to saving the hostages because
Yeah.
that's like a super
And
relevant one.
to
So,
and I guess to clarify, we're talking about this event mainly because the deck itself, or like the set itself, mainly became meta relevant long after this
hostages
event
came
was
out.
long after this event
Like,
was initially printed.
like ZNT wasn't terrible, but it wasn't like a super dominant deck. Um, the other thing we need to mention is back then Standard was played more than anything. So while there were some
Right.
really good there were some really good ZNT cards, including this one, we kind of are focusing on it in a Neo Standard context. So we'll talk about it more when ZNTF drops and that becomes really relevant. But saving the hostages is like one of the all-time strongest events when it comes to just doing stuff. The only downside to this event is that it comes at level 2, but otherwise it's super efficient. So what it reads is it's a 2/1 red event. It reads um, salvage a character and then brainstorm 3. If you hit a climax, salvage another character. So if you're lucky, then this is just pay 1, salvage 2, which is nuts. There were cards at the time which were 2/2 to just salvage 2 characters, and those were played and regarded as fairly strong.
I mean, it's
So
still
this card is
good
just
even today.
yeah, yeah, those
I would
it's
play this
still, like,
card.
totally fine.
I would play this
Yeah,
card if it were in a good deck. Like,
yeah,
um,
it's just good. Like, because at the very minimum, you're paying 1 to get a character back. That's like not the worst. That's the fail case of Chonkichi. But then if you mill a climax and decks are pretty good at compressing these days, you get another character. It's insane. It was really, really powerful. It was the backbone of lots of standard-based strategies alongside some other really broken events. Did we put Ogawa in our
no,
list?
I was considering it, but like
Yeah, Ogawa's contingent only on like exactly the
Ogawa's,
Louise.
yeah,
Louise and Siesta brainstorms are like
definite,
necessary for that card to be
definitely a
busted.
standard card more than Neo Standard relevant, I think. But
I'd say so. Anyway, so hostages really busted. Let's go back to that summary stage. Yep.
oh
So
yeah, yeah.
emo swing.
We
Yeah.
can continue on
So
to Demo Swing. I mean, this is like another
yes.
engine card. For
So
that is good in a different way than hostages.
yes. Emo swing being the nickname of this incredibly, incredibly powerful card. So this is World of Faded Colors. It's in Haruhi. It's very, very similar to uh what we just had before, where you just go +2. Like, sorry, you go +1 because you're playing the event. So what this reads is 2/1 red event. 2/1 red events tend to be pretty strong for whatever reason. And this actually continues on with the stupid red Madoka event that saw a lot of play. You choose one of your level 1 or higher characters and put it in the waiting room. If you do, put a level 0 or lower Dansho character onto the stage, which is Haruhi, basically. So you put a level 0 or lower character, usually the bomb, because that card also gave something power when it attacked, and then you salvage 2 characters from your waiting room. So you're not losing a character because you're replacing it with a weaker character, but still a character, and then you just salvage 2. Yeah, this was a huge part of why Haruhi was completely busted when it came out as the first Neo standard focused set.
It would still be really good
'Cause
today. Like,
it would
it
if
would be insanely
know,
broken today. I
if
mean, it
it,
only
if it
gets better. It only gets better as like cards get better, right?
yeah,
Like
imagine this read like choose one of your level 1 or higher characters to put in waiting room. If so, choose a level 0 or lower. What's Slime's what's this?
imagine playing this with Dow's like on death Kome. Like imagine sacking the on death Kome with this card, putting like I don't know, a Cheery on board with the summon, and then salvaging two. Like
There are heaps of characters that just have had their value play when they get played and then they're done. Like the one I was thinking of is I don't know her name, but it's like the slime card, the 1/0 that summons another thing that goes to memory at end of turn. Like a card like
oh,
that has
Ramorous,
run it.
Ramorous, Ramorous. Yes.
Ramaris, yeah. Like a card like that has run its course immediately after it's been played. Sack it, get rid of it, get another random dude on board, and then just salvage whatever you want.
Oh, you can also just get a break. So like another thing is like you can play like a weak level 1 card in the front row or wherever, like a utility card. Let's say I don't know, like an Nazusa
One
or something.
zero
I
one
don't
zero
know.
neg 4K to something.
Yeah, you can sack the weak card and then play a brainstorm from your waiting room. You know, you can do stuff like that. It's just the possibilities with this card are so limitless. You know,
Yeah.
if you really think about it, you can. Uh, this card was banned for a long time, and rightly
Can
so.
you believe this is in the same Neo standard set as freaking Endless 8? This is so stupid.
Um, so it's would I play this card if it were in a modern set? Yes, 100%. I would play. I don't know as many, 3, 4. It's so good. It is just
It is actually really insane. Like, I don't know what else to say about this. It's just really
yeah.
good.
The value here
And
is unparalleled. I think in terms of it's such a modern. It's such it's an effect that scales so well with the way they've designed cards since
Mhm.
then, because cards level 0 cards have only gotten better, so more valuable to have on stage than ever before. And there are plenty of cards that just do stuff when they get sent to the waiting room now.
Level 1 utility is also better
Yeah.
by
Yeah,
a
level 1
lot.
utility is better, so like you can spend your on play utility, as Alf said, and just replace it with a card that's actually useful. Like imagine, you know, like I said, the example, use a CIP effect and then summon a brainstorm, then brainstorm on top of, you know, salvage. I mean, a little overkill, but you get the idea, right? It's like it's so good
Yeah, it's
for a
just
lot of
insane, really.
reasons. Yeah.
Not much to say about that. Okay, what do we got next?
Jupiter.
Battling Jupiter.
Yeah.
So IMAS, at this point in time, IMAS was one of the premier defensive decks. If your opponent wanted to have any semblance of hand in the mid game, they had to basically side into a lot of your characters. And when that stopped working because of various different assists, they basically had to lose tempo a bunch in order to try and get any damage through. And remember, at this time, it didn't really play all Global Soul climaxes. So once you got to level 3, or it was mostly a heal game. And this is not only a super efficient heal, but sometimes it'll let you win a lane and also let you just direct into that lane with a random dude for more damage. So this basically reads like heal 1 plus 1 soul somewhere. And at that point in time, it was incredibly powerful. Decks were running 3 or 4 of this. And as a result, this card eventually got banned because the sustainability that decks like IMAS and Little Busters and stuff were putting out made it so games were dragging on way too long and logistics became very difficult and no one enjoyed playing against them. There's not much else to say about it. It was really, really powerful for those reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, yes. Psyker's Wish. Um, I like the design of this card. I hate this card. I hate it so much. It's like,
Hate it.
yeah, I hate this card. Everything it stands for is like wrong. This card. All right. So, firstly, let's read Psyker's Wish. For those of us who are newer and haven't read this card or don't know about this card and can't fathom why this card would possibly ever be good. It's 2/1 blue as a counter. You can choose a character with Psyker name and sacrifice it, put it in the waiting room. If you do, heal the top card of your deck to hand and then send this card to memory. So, to begin with, this is insane. Like, healing to hand, as opposed to just healing, means you're replacing the card, which is already really strong. But the act of healing before level 3 was extremely rare at this point, and it was super, super rare to do so without going neg in card advantage. When you use this on a card, you're using it on one that was already going to die for the most part. Usually the 1/0 Psyker that formed the backbone of the Madoka strategy. But in addition to that, because it's a counter, your opponent's already declared a front attack. They don't get that direct attack value. And moreover, if they needed to reverse something, for example, with Mikoto and Kuroko under one roof, the railgun finisher that required a reverse, they don't get to do that. They no longer have a reverse target. So not only was this one of the prototypical sack counters denying opponents' reverses, it was an on-rate heal that also can-tripped itself. Like, you just got the top card of your deck back. Oftentimes, that meant you could just clock something, um, and get it back immediately the next turn. So the choice of what you have to clock is diminished significantly as well if that was your plan to immediately get something back. This card happened to be good because at that point in time, level 2 heals were good. But it also did so much else and kept relevance into the late game. And every single time you attacked a Psyker, like if your opponent's field is just all Psykers and you're like, oh, where do I put my Misakuro? It doesn't matter. It's going to get sacked and they're going to heal. And I'm just going to lose all this equity. Because Misakuro has to pay before the battle starts. God, I just hate this card. It's super efficient. It's super good. I don't know if it will be playable now. My guess is that it would be in certain types of
Oh,
decks. The thing
yeah.
is that I think that standby decks are the ones that want healing and the game to go long most of all, which means they don't really want cards to go to waiting room for the most part. The thing is,
Uh,
you can sack back row with this. That is an actual neg,
I mean,
but
like, you could. Okay. I mean, like, you could just. I'm pretty sure if you sacked a card with Hand on Core with this card and Hand on Core to back, there is no battle even.
yeah. But another thing, no,
So,
I mean you're still losing the card in that lane. But
of
like another
course,
thing
but
you
it's
can do,
like.
another
It,
thing you like if you win a lane on defense and you now have a direct attack, you can just field a card in that lane that you can sack to Psyker's Wish, and then when your opponent attacks it back, your level 0 gets sacked and it never mattered. That's definitely something you can do. Like
of course.
surely this card sees play. Like there's no way this card doesn't see play, right?
I think it would.
Doesn't Yeah, I
Though,
think this is good.
it's less obvious though than like the literal best event ever printed in the game, I guess. But like I'm referring to Emo Swing, but like this is still a pretty good card, I think.
Hmm.
One
Yeah.
stock healing, always nice.
Is it the
And
literal best event? Among legal
Emo
events, I
Swing,
agree.
Emo Swing.
Among illegal events, Sharon McCall is the strongest in the game, but that's neither here nor there.
Uh, Fair enough. We're gonna skip over this card because
We're going to talk about it in a little bit, are we?
yeah, we're gonna talk about. And then after Haruhi, like we just talked about, like the Haruhi area, which is like Haruhi, Idolmaster, Zero no Sakaima, Madoka. Um, Pretty old. I think like at this point in time, uh, this next era of the card game we're going to talk about, there's going to be like a clear shift in like event identity, like not just an event identity, but like card design identity. I think starting with Nisekoi, a lot of sets became quite different than they had been before. I think we can both agree on that, right? Like
Oh, definitely, yeah.
they just became very different. And in that same way, events have also changed since Nisekoi. Bullet points are there. Like events are now, and these like kind of changes to event card design have kind of stayed the same since Nisekoi. I don't think there have been huge shifts in the way events work since then.
No,
But
I don't think so.
yeah. But basically, events are just more refined now. They have like more specific targeted focuses when they're printed, in the sense that they are often packaged with literal printed synergies with other cards. So, like for example, climax cards, climax combos that specifically refer to set events, or like end game cards that refer to like events in certain places or whatever. And if they're not like literal printed synergies, events that are actually played in decks often required like specific synergies, um, that form the backbone of certain strategies that aren't. And these cards are not just like run because they're OP, like Emo Swing. They're run because they do something that the deck needs it to do for its core strategy. So, for example, we have some examples like Up All Night, Illusion Magic, Toilet. these could be
But
considered very good events on their own, but
let's
you
talk
know,
very briefly about why those are good. Like, these
yeah,
events
yeah.
are not automatically good. In fact, I have gone on record as calling Illusion Magic one of the biggest noob traps in the game.
I don't have a
Um,
slide for it, by the way, but that's fine.
Sorry,
I don't
you
have a
don't
slide
what?
for it. I don't have a slide for it, but it's a very simple card. So
Sure. So Saikano's Up All Night is a 1/0 green event. It reads tap two of your characters of whatever trait, I believe. If you do, oh god, what does it do? It's like you let me find it because it does multiple things. It gets you stock, it gets you cards, then the card goes to the bottom of your deck. Um,
we're talking about Up All Night, not Illusion
yeah, we're
Magic.
talking
Okay.
about Up All
Oops.
Night first. Because like this card is not necessarily something you could play in every single deck. I think it'd be good in most decks and you'd go out of your way to try and play it, but that doesn't make it
So
like
right. So you rest 2 entree characters, and those characters can't stand in your next standby phase.
so back
And
row basically.
yeah,
Yep.
back row essentially. And if you did rest 2 characters, you may search your deck for up to 1 entree character, add it to your hand, and then choose 1 entree
Stock a
character in
character.
your waiting room and stock it. And then this event goes to the bottom of your deck.
So the reason why this is strong is obviously because it is a cantrip. It is stock positive. You literally get a stock for playing it. And in the right deck, it doesn't have any drawbacks. The reason is because
Yes.
Saikano had back row, which changed into another form for basically no cost. Meaning that even though it didn't get to stand, it doesn't get to stand next turn. That doesn't matter. The card is no longer on the field,
Right.
and you get a new card that no longer cares about that.
Saikano also ran like a specific I don't know what we call it now. I think UA refers to them as eggs, but like basically pay 1, sack self, do something is like the gist
Yes,
of it. Saikano's like main level 0 card, like its plussing engine at level 0, was a card
as a
that did
runner.
that. So
Yeah.
you could rest that card with this event and just sack it later, and it didn't matter that you
Yep.
couldn't stand it because it still provided you value after you use
Exactly.
it. So
And that's why that card is good there. The next one is Illusion Magic, which is just 1/0 blue. I don't think it had any requirements. It just both players shuffle their waiting room into their libraries. So because Fate was a very I mean, you can talk about this when you played this deck, right?
right. So I guess I think the reasons why Illusion Magic were good are a little less obvious.
Esoteric.
It's a little less explicit, but essentially the deck was one that could justify holding events in hand for as long as it needed to. And Illusion Magic is a very timing sensitive card, so most decks can't afford to hold an event like that in their hand, like a dead card. Essentially, they usually can't do that. This deck could. Additionally, the deck ran a Brainstorm, a very powerful Brainstorm, a tap self salvage plussing Brainstorm that allowed it to just grab events from its clock whenever it triggered a bar, of which it ran 8. So you could justify running this event at lower counts, which is a very important reason why it was even like playable. I think most decks would not want to play more than like 2 of this card if they had to. So essentially it was like a very specific intersection of ease of access plus like how the deck functioned that allowed Fate to justify running this card. And obviously, refreshing is just part of Fate's MO. Like
Yeah,
deck
basically.
control and all that is just what it did. So it was like a whole bunch of stuff that came together to make it so this card was quite popular in the 2019 Fate lists.
I mean, it was still played even after that. A lot of people were
That's
enamored
true.
by it,
That's
by
true.
its the free fresh effect, and also sometimes if your opponent's in a bad deck state, you
Mm-hmm.
can just win the game because it's an 8-bar deck as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, yeah.
And then there's
So
like
yeah,
Toilet, which is like
I mean,
if you
that
want to
card's
talk
just
about
always
Toilet.
kind of. I don't really. It's just a really strong event. It might be one of the strongest ever printed,
I feel like
honestly.
it only gained notoriety though because of that level 1 combo, the Tae.
Probably, yeah.
Like the
I
ability
mean,
to just like it synergized so well with that card that it was just like hard to not play those cards
yeah.
together.
Hmm.
because it's. I don't think
Well,
Bang Dream necessarily plays Toilet now. It's as good as Toilet is, as a concept.
people try to cram it in, but I think that they might have moved past that. Like,
Yeah.
there's enough good characters to not need cards like
hmm
Toilet.
And another distinction of this era of events, like card design, is that they don't really print this card anymore. They don't print cards like this anymore. For better or
I
for
mean, they
worse.
print Umiyuri. They printed
I mean,
Umiyuri.
okay, but Umiyuri is clearly like it's just not this though. It's not this.
Yeah, that's true. It's not actually as
Like
good as
it is
the
not
most.
this, right? Like Umiyuri is like, sure,
It's a
like
good card.
it is a
It's
good
just
card, but it's
not
just like not turbo.
emo.
What are they thinking? This is so insanely broken. Um,
I think I'm going to revise my top 5 list after this. I
right.
think there's a few events that I really do think are now absurdly busted and should be on top, like Xylophone and Emo Swing. Anyway,
Sure thing.
okay, so
And we're
going
just
forward.
gonna, yeah, we can just and then we can just talk about. Did you want to talk about like specific examples of
Sure.
event synergies? I guess
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got Marika on
the most infamous.
Marika's the most infamous, but I would argue Kosaki was the better card.
Yeah, I mean,
In
I was
terms of,
debating which one to put on here, but I'm pretty sure most people will.
yeah, they know about
I
Marika Best
yeah,
Grill and the triple Marika memes and stuff like that. So Marika was the strongest finisher ever introduced to Weiss ever at that point in time. There was nothing even remotely close. Like, we're talking, like Trouble Girl was maybe, a solid 6 or 7 out of 10. Marika was like a 40 out of 10. It was completely unhinged in terms of what it could do with its slot efficiency.
by the way, just to illustrate how good this card was. So this card came out in 2014, right? Nisekoi is 2014.
Mm-hmm.
We are just starting to
Was it
get.
2014 or 2015?
It's 2014 for sure. I think.
Sure,
I think.
2014, whatever.
Yeah. We are just starting to get printed finishers that are like on this level of like a burn on attack combined with like a restander like this. And those are climax. Those are restricted to climax combos. This is not. Just would like to
There's,
point that out.
there's a reason that for years and years after Nisekoi, not before, after Nisekoi was printed and banned and power crept, people still talked about things like building your own Marika. That's how influential Marika was. And she requires you to play 2 Pendant of Promise during the game to unlock her actual functionality.
I lost to an
Pendant,
Nisekoi deck recently,
I'm sure you did. I'm
and
sure you did.
staring down the barrel of triple Marika is still pretty
Triple
scary.
Marika,
It's pretty
you can't
scary.
you can't do triple Marika
Well, I
without
mean,
some
obviously,
serious sacks,
it wasn't. It
dude.
wasn't literally. It wasn't like triple restand, but like just
Yeah,
having
sure,
this,
3
having
Marika.
3 cards that burn on attack, and then like potentially 1 to 2 restands plus like the additional burn. It's still so scary.
Yeah,
And I
it's good.
lost, so rightfully
Yeah, but
rightfully scared, I guess.
all the pendants were incredibly mediocre events. The yellow one was
Yes.
literally just 1/1 yellow, search for a key trait, add to hand. The red, I'm going in relative order of playability. The red one was 1/1, tap 2 characters to salvage was
2.
it
It's
salvage 2,
salvage
ditch
2,
1?
ditch 1. Salvage 2, ditch 1.
Yeah, which a lot of people touted as the strongest, but it was very, very quickly apparent that yellow was better. The blue one was just a 3k counter for all key trait, I think.
Yep.
And green one gave one of your key traits some amount of
30
power until the end of your opponent's
3500.
next turn.
3500,
Yeah, it
I
was.
think.
These events all like they're not
Not that great.
terrible,
Uh,
but they just kind of suck. Like, you shouldn't play these events normally, right?
compare
Yeah,
again compared to
emo
this.
swing, emo swing versus like.
Versus,
Never mind emo swing. Up all night versus red pendant. How is that a contest? That's so
sure, yeah,
stupid.
of course.
Such a stupid comparison. But yeah. So Marika, very powerful, event based, forced you to play 4 of the pendant, forced you to play cards that bonded to the pendant, which was kind of a benefit as well. But like, not good events, insane payoff. this is the direction in which they started driving Weiss from 2014 onwards.
Yep. And a more recent
What else?
example to drive home the point is this card,
Yes, yes,
Hina.
Hina. So I All Knowing, I think is her subtitle or whatever. This
Something
is
like
a
that.
3/2 healer. It's a 3/2 healer, and when this attacks, you ditch a card from hand. If you do, look up to 2 cards from the top of your opponent's deck, and then put up to 2 characters from among them into your opponent's clock. With a whole bunch of caveats. The short version is it wants you to play a bunch of unique events. So what this
That go
deck
to
ended
memory.
up
That
doing,
go to memory. Yep.
yes, yes. So almost every event in this set goes to memory. There's one notable exception, which is actually played, but basically you played 3 yellow pendant, exactly yellow pendant. It's just 1/1 yellow search a what's the trait again? Like
I don't know.
whatever. Search a summer trait from deck, add to hand. You
It is
played
summer. It is
uh
summer. Yeah, you're right.
yeah,
I think.
you played a 1/1 green event, which is salvage a character, and then check top if it's level 2 or higher stock. So it's like a 1/1 salvage event for the most part. You played the 1/1 TD event, which is just a 1/1 green, search a climax from your deck. That's all it did. Arguably one of the strongest events printed recently, simply because of its function, but like whatever. You played a 1/1 red promo event, which is just check the top X, where X is the number of summer you have. Like basically, you played all of these cards, which are like probably not good enough in most decks, but you need to play them here to unlock this incredibly powerful finisher. Because once you have 4 or 5 different event names in memory, then this card is basically uncancelable burn 2 against most decks that don't run events.
Uh,
Ironically, if this mirror ever happens, neither of you is going to be happy.
uh, specifically the amount of differently named events in your memory is relevant because that determines how many cards you can send a clock from the top.
Yes.
2 cards of your
The
opponent's
layout
deck.
was like you played like 3 yellow pendant, 2 green salvage, 2 climax search, 2 red promo, and sometimes people played an additional one of some sort, often the blue one, which isn't very good. But anyway, yeah, the deck played heaps and heaps of events because it wanted that payoff.
Also note that
Now,
this is a climax combo card.
yes,
Yep.
the other event deck is obviously Danmachi. Million
Yep.
Live also had a bunch of events.
I mean, we can talk about Danmachi right now.
Yeah,
Like,
here's
there's a
Danmachi.
lot of
All right.
combos like this. I think Bell is like the quintessential example,
I don't
though.
think Bell is I don't think Bell is quintessential at all. I think Bell has like 10 or something
Okay,
bonus
sure,
effects.
sure.
Like the
But like,
quintessential one is probably like Sachi or Goblin Slayer. This one
fair
is the
enough.
best one, and it's not even close. Like
Of
it
course.
is it is so far off from the next one that it is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, but no one plays. Okay, people play Grisaya, but like, no one plays Goblin
Yeah,
Slayer anymore. All right.
sure.
And people don't play
So
Grisaya because of Sachi.
no,
That's for
but if you
sure.
had to if you just had Goblin Slayer printed in a set like 7K cross turn, it would be fine. But Bell is on a different. So let's just read Bell and note that Bell refers to not one but 2 different events, and both of them are really relevant, and you want to play 4 of both. When this attacks, this 1045 gains X power, where X is 1,500 times the number of firebolts in your waiting room. If this card was just 1,000 times the number of firebolt, viability would be completely different. But no, it's 1,500, which means sometimes this is a 1/0 attacking as a 10/5. And if you have a climax, that's 11/5. Then the climax combo is on a like when you have unrivaled feelings in your climax zone, which is a door. If this is in the front row, you get to either search or salvage Hestia Knife, which we talked about earlier. It's
Hmm.
just the torch slash camera with counter step, which is just really, really powerful because that card at the minimum gives you another character.
Right.
It's just that strong.
And for
And in a
reference,
yep,
Firebolt is a 1/0 event that lets you salvage a character level X or lower from your waiting room, and level and X is the number of bells, like this card
bells.
itself in your waiting room.
the notable thing about this is that if you ever have a Bell in your waiting room, Firebolt will be able to salvage it because
Mm-hmm.
Bell just Bell is level 1, and there's 1 Bell in waiting room, which means that every Firebolt equals a Bell. And if it weren't for that, Firebolt would be another event that you'd never really want to play. But because of that, and because of the effect on this Bell, Danmachi has made its name as a 12 event deck that is extremely formidable with like it breaks boards like no other deck in the game has ever done before. I think that's probably a reasonable statement to make. I think Quince is also very good at it, but Danmachi does nothing except break boards, and it does it exceedingly well.
Yes.
So yeah, those would be the strongest. Oh, here's the other really strong event deck that we want to talk about. So
Symphogear.
yeah, all the Symphogear believers finally got paid off in 2021 with a really powerful, aggressive level 2 attacking deck. And then they were subsequently hit with a banhammer because Symphogear
Uh,
players aren't allowed to be happy ever. So basically, this pulls out a level 3. The level 3 can recur itself, can pull out more stuff. Basically, this allows you to really start the aggression at level 2, which is really, really useful because of how Symphogear plays. Um,
would like to
while
note
Yep.
that Symphogear's like gimmick throughout the years has been like these kinds of events, but this is like the first time they had really commit like this was like the first this like what is this set called XV was like the first time they had ever printed these events with like actual modern trappings. So like these events all have
Uh,
bonders, all have like bonders or like searchers, like costless bonders or searchers. These events all have like playable level 3s to play like with these cards with these events. And this engine, self-described engine, as contained within the card, like kept giving you recursion for these events, which was super important, I think. Um,
um, I should note that Symphogear did have fairly strong playable versions of this event. It was just never strong enough to be particularly meta game defining. Which
that's just that's come on, man.
no, I've had some
The
of
Civil Gear players that are listening are gonna send us death threats, man. The deck
they can
has,
send all the like I played against the Hibiki versions with like the newer Gungnir's. It was pretty good.
but it wasn't
Just
like
no, it wasn't meta level, like it wasn't ban worthy. But this was for a number of reasons that include the event. But I like this event doesn't define Symphogear so much as the characters do. It's just a vehicle to making a broken deck broken.
of course. Um,
Yeah,
but
that's
like
Symphogear. It was very strong. It got
yeah,
banned.
very strong. Yeah.
So, did you have something else to say?
No, no, no. And then we can just
No,
move on
I
to
mean,
like
I'm changing my top 5
you're
events.
changing it right now. All right,
Yeah,
dude.
okay. I think the strongest event is probably Xylophone now. Like Xylophone goes up top now. I will look.
Oh,
I'll
I
give
mean
my justification.
these weren't ordered, but like you can do whatever.
Sure, sure. So I'll justify why I've put all these here. Torch is there because it is never bad. Like as long as it fits into the confines of a deck, Torch is a card that has a flaw. All character cards in this game have a flaw. You can play them and you can attack with them. Torch's flaw is the exact same as every other character card, but it adds selectivity and mill, which makes it a card that lots and lots and lots of decks would play, more so than I think any event has been printed. In terms of raw power, Torch is not top 5. It's not top 10. It's probably not even top 20. But in terms of effective function and efficiency, it is extremely high up there. Uh, Toilet is insane because I think a lot of decks would just run a card like that. I think that the game has changed a fair bit since Toilet was Broke-a-Doke. But I think that if, for example, a Climax combo was printed that salvaged a Toilet type event, it would be very playable. Think
I
about that for a
mean,
moment.
like yeah, because you'd get stuff like it's a hand filter of sorts plus stock. Like every time like it would be, I mean, pretty
Insane,
good.
right?
It'd be pretty good.
Sure.
Um,
Hyunkichi, I think almost any deck would run if it had the cost reduction. And I think most decks would run it even without the cost reduction if they needed a way to break open boards. This is not an experiment we can really run, but I think that that is true. I think 4K is enough, that it is worth playing. Because even when you have to pay stock for Pyonkichi, it's not bad. It's
yep.
still really good.
Mm-hmm.
Xylophone's broken because it's super high power level. Stock Swap is single-handedly dismantles an entire genre of decks, really powerful. The other cards I would add at this point would be Emo Swing. Emo Swing is just God. Every time I read that card, I forget something about it, and it's usually the number of characters you salvage. Because yeah, so
It
that
is a
card's just
pretty
busted.
crazy card.
It
I
is a
guess
pretty crazy
I guess
card.
we'd be assuming, if the card were in a deck, like if we could port the card to any deck or whatever, I guess
Hmm.
as a
But
profile, right?
I think that of these cards on the list, Torch is printed widely enough and sees play widely enough that it's kind of battle proven. So yeah, that's fair enough. I think most decks would run Emo Swing. I think it is stupid. I think Toilet is like incredibly powerful in execution and it scales well. So it only takes a little bit of a modern push to make that card incredibly powerful. I think Pionkichi is just overtuned, probably shouldn't exist. Xylophone would see play in any defensive deck in the modern era. I firmly believe that. I think that if, for example, Kimono Friends had access to Xylophone, it would have played it. I think that Stock Swap is an event that actively draws people to decks. One of the reasons to play, for example, Fate right now in English is because it has Stock Swap to deal with Tokyo Revengers. Do you have a top five?
I do.
All
Uh,
right, let's see them.
it's mostly, and just to clarify, stock swap is the effect of sending your opponent's stock into the waiting room and then stocking cards from the top of your opponent's deck so they have the same amount afterwards. I mostly agree with Torch and Toilet. But for my like salvage thing, I put Flower Stand and Feeding. Um,
And what's Flower Stand for
Flower
those who aren't aware?
Stand is it's like a it's like it's a 1/1 salvage event that essentially can possibly refund the stock you spend on it. Without the need for like a specific card, like for Pyonkichi. Obviously, like if I'm assuming that the entire Pyonkichi stuff gets ported over to like a different set, then sure, that's fair enough. But basically, I think Flower Stand or Feeding are just like more generic, more portable, more like
Hmm.
easily portable versions of this effect. Um, and the
Something I
stock
should
refund is
something
something that I value a lot, I think.
Something I should note is that the ability to break boards is only good if you're kind of on the cusp already.
Yes.
Danmachi does that without needing Pyonkichi.
Also,
Like
only
Pyonkichi,
relevant if like if it like matters, right? Because like
yeah,
if you're playing against a deck that just like doesn't care if it loses board, then like nice
it
4K
doesn't
power,
matter,
bro.
right?
Nice 4K
It's a
power.
slightly better version of fireballs, and that's like not great. But I think that because standby is really good and prevalent in so many formats, so many decks, that I can justify putting it up there. But I
Yeah, it's
totally
fair enough.
understand flower stand feeding. If you take into account the fact that these cards need to be supported.
Yeah, of
Feeding
course.
by itself, I mean that card is also in it's also in Day I Became a God,
Yeah,
and
with a slightly different refund condition, but it's like all the
it is
same, honestly.
consistently the worst event in that deck.
Yeah.
Consistently, it's just the worst event in the deck,
Is there
and
a bond
it's
to
not
it?
actually.
Is there a
It's
bond to
actually
it?
not. Yes, there is, but it's
Okay.
unplayable.
Oh,
Um, it's like
yeah.
you can play it, but it's like not worth playing it.
Fair enough.
The thing about that is that it does need to be well supported, and while feeding and flower stand are better than the version of in Day I Became a God, even in Day I Became a God, at worst it's just 1/1 salvage, which is the same as Pure Kichi at the worst, it's 1/1 salvage, which is playable, but feeding, I think it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that feeding made the initial instance of Grisaya actually playable, and Flower
Mm-hmm.
Stand is the linchpin of the Millimas however many events Uber combo finish deck, both of which are carried super hard by those, and I respect it. I think it's fair enough.
It's powerful, consistent. It's like very consistent selection. That's like no strings attached, essentially. Which is I think,
Valuable. It's
maybe
really
not
valuable.
underrated, but it's like pretty like sleeper powerful. I think. My fourth event is Avengers
Peace.
Assemble, which is such a sick card. I love this card. It's a 3/3 event that reads, essentially, search your deck for up to 2 characters, add them to your hand, and then play 2 characters from your hand whose level is equal to or lower than your current level. Like, come on, it's so sick. You get to,
It's
you
good.
get to.
It's really good.
It is like selection that turns into like efficiency because you're paying 3 stock to play, presumably play 2/3/2 like two stock characters. So like why not? And you get all their on play effects because they're played from your hand because of the event. They're not played by the effect of the event. Essentially, they're like played from your hand, so all like come into play from hand effects activate. I think it's a really sick card. I think I feel like most decks would want to play this card if they had like access to a version of this card. And I think it's like a really strong draw to playing Marvel, mainly because like this event does a lot of really good things for any deck that is playing really good level 3s, which I think in 2022 Weiss, every deck is playing good level 3s. So
I mean, this is
you
the
know,
single worst event on your list, and I think it should be Emo Swing, but that is neither here nor there.
I mean, I could just swap out like
Actually, you could say
something for Emo
Toilet
Swing.
is you could cut Toilet from this list.
Yeah, could cut Toilet for Emo Swing. I'm not too fussed about it because Emo Swing has only ever existed in like one set, right? So it's like
But you
it's like one of
played in
those
any
things.
set, right?
Of course,
We
of
spent like
course,
5
of
minutes
course, of
waxing
course.
poetic.
I can't lie. Like obviously, I would take Emo Swing if it were available. And then like I put Stock Swap there because I think like
It just has such
yeah,
a strong effect on the game.
it's
Just by
it's like
existing, it's so
it's meta
threatening.
defining. Yeah, it's like meta defining. It changes how people play. Like the moment someone sees this effect in your deck in your waiting room, it just changes how they have to play the game. Like suddenly
Mhm.
3 stocking is more attractive. Like weirdly, 3 stocking is more attractive. Like in certain contexts, like when you're playing in stock swap. Like I had to do
It's
that.
very
Like
strange, right?
yeah, it's so
You're
weird.
just
Like
sapping existing just saps your opponent's resources.
yeah, like I was playing against a Mushoku player, and I had like 10 clean stock, right? Going into like at level 2. And I had to 3 stock because I was like, I sent them to level 3 early and they had green for their like character stock. So I'm like, all right, fuck. Okay, I guess I have to 3 stock because I don't want to lose the game. Like I really just don't want to lose the game right here, right now. So like I had to do that because I had like 15 or so cards in deck. So like eating a stock swap there is like game losing, right? So
If you talk about like stock efficiency and thinking about like generating your own stock swap is like a passive tax on your opponent's stock. They're not allowed
yes.
to have that much stock, or else bad things will happen to them very quickly.
Yes.
Which is, I think that can't be understated how strong that is. Keeping your opponent at like a restricted amount of resources, because if they ever go above that, then boom, they might just lose the game. That's really powerful.
One thing I think is very notable about the event stock swaps is that they're all level 2 or lower, mostly. I think they have made a concerted effort to print stock swap as like a character ability and restrict that ability to level 3 cards. Like I think that's a very, very obvious, like clear design principle that they started following. Because at one point, like the meta was so like lame. It was like all the deck, like basically Konosuba and Bang Dream were the decks that just like stock swapped to you and then made you refresh with less climate. Like it's just so it was so lame. It was so stupid. And I think they looked at that and went, all right, well, we don't want that to happen again. So we're just never gonna print like accessible stock swaps before level 3 now.
Hmm.
and I don't think they have like in a very very long time.
Yeah, they
Um,
tax stock swap really hard now. Like if you look at the new Lisbeth, that was just revealed for Sao 10th, it only has one ability, and that ability is either stock swap or 4K to your board. Does nothing else. Like just straight up nothing.
oh, is it a level 3?
It is a level 3, 3-2.
No, it's a level
And
3.
it's not even free. You have to pay 1 to get that effect. Like it is so highly scaled.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of ridiculous, honestly.
Right. They also did that with stock swap. It's crazy. Like they just said no, we're not going to allow players to do, and for good. I think it's
Yeah,
mostly
it's
been
for
for the
good
better.
reason.
Like it's so lame playing against these cards. So,
I
uh,
agree. It's just dumb.
yeah, and specifically level 3 is an important distinction because it allows you to like actually spend your stock before like your opponent gets to play their stock swap effect. It makes it like a lot more whatchamacallit. Uh it's not you basically you essentially have a choice with level 3 stock swaps as opposed to level 2 stock swaps where you don't really have a choice, where like
Mhm.
you just kind of have to sit there and eat it.
Pretty much.
Yeah. uh and then talking about really strong events, I guess we can just talk about some band events. Band
The
events.
band events have like all heal
Very
ones, so
very famous. Yeah, they're
it
most of them are healing events.
yeah, we've got QK from LB, it's a 3-1 event. Oh well, we've got Emo
Well,
Swing. We don't need to talk about
obviously
Emo
we talked
Swing
about
again.
emo swing. It was banned in the past, right? It just came off in the
It's
like the last list
yeah,
or something, after like
it's
however many
still at
years.
1 or something, right?
Yeah, something like that. But it is like the rare example of an event that has been banned that is not healing. But we can talk about the
Yep.
quintessential banned
QK,
healing event.
3-1. This is exactly xylophone fortune telling. Um, if you played LB at any point at this time, and you saw your opponent get to level 3, and you saw them play this card down, you just want to leave the table, leave the game. You don't want to deal with this shit. I'm like, what is this nonsense? The reason I don't consider this as strong as xylophone fortune telling is because you're only able to play this level 3. So that's just weaker than being able to play at level 2, especially these days,
Yeah.
where finishes are so strong that you can just die from 3-0. But this card was banned because it made tournaments go for too long. And it is just strong radon value when people can't finish you in one turn.
It is also not banned anymore, but that's mainly because who plays this?
Well,
Oh,
yeah, LB is like its identity is a anti-heal deck anyway. So
yeah.
yeah.
There's actually one event I completely forgot about. I think we forgot about it. But
Sure.
are there any more slides? I mean, like there are so many examples of heal events that have been banned. Like we talked
Yeah, I
about
mean
Jupiter.
Cordelia's Garden.
Like there's Cordelia's Garden. There's healing. I think wasn't healing magic restricted too at some point.
I don't
No,
think it was. I
no, it
don't
wasn't.
think it was ever on
Okay,
the restricted list. But the Sunbucker event from Fate
sure, yeah,
was
yep.
3-3 heal 3, which is even more efficient than 2-2 heal 2. But it wasn't actually as strong as the Xylophone event, in my opinion. Uh,
There's one last card
yeah,
though
yeah.
that I
What is
think
it?
is cool to talk about. Can you guess? It's not a heal event.
Is it? Oh, I was gonna guess Execution. Um, can we
Banned,
talk
like
about the
banned.
PQ event? Oh, that was banned.
Yeah, it's not a heal event.
Was it, wait, the Bang Dream warehouse event was never banned, was it?
No, the PR was
No.
banned. Man, that card was insane. Still is probably
Uh,
insane.
what
I'll give
was
you a
banned?
few seconds.
Nah, just tell me.
All right. I mean, this card is banned, right? So, and it's an events.
Oh my god. This card is banned, not for
this guy
power level
wrote
reasons,
a this guy wrote an
but it's
article about this card back in the
yeah,
day.
it's highly unique is the thing. So this event literally just reads, remove your opponent's climax card as a counter. So this is weaker than the other climax removal effect, which is Fate Zero's Gilgamesh, because your opponent gets to have one attack at least. The reason they banned this card is because they moved Weiss to a climax play centric game. They don't want people to miss out on their super sick, awesome climax plays. And that's really it. It's not banned on power level reasons. Now, before we finish, I do want to talk about the worst event in the game, and I will challenge anybody to find a worse event than this one.
Let us know in
You
the
have
comments. The point
yeah,
I can just get it. Did you talk about the
yeah,
fucking the stupid restand event, right?
the Persona Q one, yeah.
Yeah. Oh my. I mean, it looks cool.
It's the promo art, yeah. It's nice, but it is, it is, it is so incredibly bad. Like, I don't even know what to say. There's no synergy. There's no... All right, so I'm just going to start listing off the event and what it does. And
Oh
honestly,
sure.
I can stop after the level and the cost. It is a
Can you
yellow event
though?
from Persona Q. Yeah, I really can, honestly.
It would
I
be
really can.
irresponsible to not just
All right. So it is a 3-9 event. It is the most expensive legal event in the game. I know there are more expensive ones. I know the Wusa one exists, but costs 9. And at that point in time, bad events, they're bad. Um, at that point in time, you got to think, what's this going to do? Does this just instantly kill the opponent? Does this give all of my characters like burn 1 3 times or something? No, no. It gives your characters an ability which costs even more stock. And it's not just that, it is a reverse required ability. This effect gives all of your characters, when you reverse your battle opponent, you may pay 2. If you do, memory kick your opponent and then swap with one of your back row characters. So this includes your back row characters, right? So if your opponent wasn't kicked to memory, you would actually be able to get all of those attacks on like... No, that's not even true. You need to reverse. Oh my
I
god,
mean,
there's so many safeguards.
the obvious
It's...
like design intent, right, is for you to like direct attack with your one soul back row cards, I guess. That's like the intent, right?
I guess, but it's
It's
so
so
bad.
bad
Like,
though. It's so bad. I agree, it's so bad. Oh my
so not
god.
not only is this a 3-9 event that is like unplayable unless you specifically build towards it, but in order to get any reverses at level 3, either your opponent needs to be a potato, or you need to play level 3 cards, presumably level 3 cards that cost stock. In addition to that, you need to pay more stock on reverse in order to get basically a restand. You are paying 13 stock through your turn, minimum, without counting character costs, without additional burns, without counting anything else, to get 2 quote unquote restand direct attacks. 3,
Uh
technically, because no,
yeah.
it's not 3, it's 2. It's only
It's
2,
two.
because you can
It's two.
only attack... Your characters don't stand and swap, your characters just swap. So they went out of their way, every possible opportunity, to make this card unplayably bad. There is no instance in any Persona deck where I would prefer to have this card over any of the other terrible Persona cards, and that includes Armageddon.
Just to note how bad this card is. This
You
is
have
an
the
event.
Miku one?
I
Oh,
have the
yes.
I have an even better comparison. Here's the Million Line event that is
Uh,
3/7. You can't play this. You have no red cards on stage. You ditch 3 cards and then you burn 3 times. You get it's
you get more instances of damage immediately.
for less stock. I mean, you're ditching more cards, but like, I mean,
Oh no, you need a red
bruh.
character on field.
Also,
Whatever will you do?
don't need to reverse. Like,
So I am keeping in mind that the characters in the back that you swap into do get full attacks, including trigger phase. But even with that, the cost of the restand is so prohibitive, so ridiculous, that this card is actual chaff.
is this flavor? It's not right.
No.
Okay.
Well, it kind of is, in that in
Is
Persona Q you have a party of 5 and they all get to attack every turn.
okay, sure,
But
but
this
like,
this isn't all out attack flavor. This is just bad. Like, there's nothing to this card.
Maybe they're just maybe it's also like a reference to Sunkyu. I mean, I can bring that card up too.
Can you please bring up a playable version of this, which is the Sunkyu event is a Miku event, which is very flavorful and actually much better, even though it is less guaranteed, because Miku not only has inbuilt ways to build stock easily, but the event is just a lot better.
I will
Like it,
just show the
okay.
card right
So
now.
I've raged about this stupid card. All right, so Sunkyu event, another 3-9 event. So tied for the most expensive, but like,
The translation's not correct, but
okay,
it's
sure.
a pretty simple card. So
Yeah. So all of your characters gain when this character is up to once turn, when this character's damage is cancelled, you just restand immediately. No additional cost, no nothing. You just get extra attacks to whack the opponent with if your attacks don't go through. And if your attacks go through, well, your opponent might be dead. So that's good as well. No fail case, no reverse needed, no additional stock. And while this is like obscenely expensive, think you can actually afford this. It's part of its game plan. So even with that consideration, like even ignoring that consideration, this is just so much better. It's not good, but it's so much better. Incomparably better.
I feel like the Persona Q card is also a reference to this event.
I
You don't think
100% of
so?
that game. I 100% of that. I mean,
Like
maybe.
like it has to be, right? Like there's no way they would just like this is a
Wait,
total
is that PDF F or X?
it's second. PDF
Second. Okay,
second.
so I think
PDF
that
second.
that was actually out by the time
Yeah.
PQ dropped.
Yeah. It was out before. It was like one, two, three, four sets before Persona Q.
Do you want to know the set that directly preceded Persona Q?
Yes. Nisekoi.
It was Nisekoi. Yeah.
Da Capo
Yeah.
EB.
And there's
Uh LB
LBEB was
card
around there as
mission.
well.
Yeah, I mean like the big one is Nisekoi, obviously.
Yeah. LB card mission was good, but like every deck was every Nisekoi was tier Nisekoi, and then like Kantai LB LL were like tier 1.5 or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not worth playing when Nisekoi existed. All right, before we do finish up, there are a couple of other cool events we should talk about, and I think we'd be remiss not to talk about. Have you got an execution slide?
I do not.
That's all right. Execution is the best super expensive event in the game. It is a 3/8 event. It costs 8 stock, and it simply reads, put your clock into your hand. So you heal usually 6, you go +5, and then execution goes to memory. Um, it isn't actually good enough to be competitively viable, but compared to the other chaff that Persona has, it is. I mean, you can't compare them. It's just completely different. Execution was brought back in a different form in Persona 5. It is a 2/4 event, which is quite interesting. It says sack any number of your Phantom Thief characters and search your deck for a character with cost and level equal to the sacrificed characters' costs and levels, and put them onto the field. So Persona actually does have ways to manipulate cost and level, mostly level, really. But the problem with that card is that it costs 4. It didn't cost 4. It might be kind of playable, but as it stands, it's like bad because it turns out Tinker is bad. In Weiss, it just is. Yeah. So execution is, aside from having sick art, like that art is great. Um, and it doesn't have anything to do with the game. Like there's no flavor reference here. If you really tried, I'm sure you could find something. But it's a cool event. I think it's cool. Is there anything else we want to touch on? Like, there's the Osamatsu win the game event. There's other stuff we could talk about, but I think we've talked everyone's ears off at this point, right?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, we've gone through a lot of events. There are some really bad ones, but I don't need to talk about the really bad ones. There's All Out Attack, which we talked about in our flavor episode. That card is incredibly bad for multiple reasons. There's some really bad events in Nanoha as well. But yeah, so that is a somewhat thorough dive into the world of events, into the good ones, the
Oh,
bad ones,
what about the time
what
walk? Konosuba time walk. That's a cool event.
the time walk that requires you to eat all of your damage. Yeah, so we can talk about freeze, we can talk about the Saikano equivalents as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So, didn't you want to talk about Fish Observatory, which is like roughly in that fish observation, roughly in that ballpark as well?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's
All
just
right. So
cool.
yeah. So there are some events which basically accelerate the game. So the freeze event in Konosuba, let me pull up the exact text because there's a lot to it.
I will quickly add a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
So give me a sec.
Freeze event. Where is it? There's the stupid rock paper scissors. No, that's a character, isn't it? It was Konosuba 1, right?
Yes. Oh,
So the freeze event is a yellow 1/1 event, simply called freeze. And what it reads is if you're level 2 or lower, your opponent's level 1 or lower, you may discard 3 cards from your hand to your waiting room. If you do, put this in your level zone and you get another turn. So this card is interesting on a number of levels, but I'll just say the level that's what it does is it accelerates the game. It adds an extra 7 damage to you in addition, in exchange for you getting to hit your opponent 3 times and losing some cards. You're not losing a heap of cards because you get another turn, which means you actually get to draw, and if you really want, you get to clock, but you also get to brainstorm again, you get to do any combos you have, all of that happens. But another thing about every turn in Weiss is that if you field 3 characters, they often just die. So you can think of it like that. You're fielding an extra wave of characters in order to get an extra turn. It's not quite the same because you're still attacking and still having your normal stuff happening, but this being an extra turn card is really cool. It is very not abusable because you literally can't play it after you hit level 3, and your opponent doesn't take any additional damage outside the extra attacks you make. But it is a really cool event, and people did try to make it work. There is a roughly equivalent card in Saikano, which I think is probably a bit better in that regard, because instead of taking an extra turn, you prep yourself perfectly for the next turn.
I got it. I got it. It's coming. Oh,
I don't actually know the name of that card. There it is.
disappeared
Something
highlights.
highlight. Yeah, highlight. Sure. So you can put a card in your clock and put it into level zone. So you take 6 damage, not 7. If you do, salvage 3, salvage a climax, and then stock 3. So it's as if you took an extra turn, but instead of going neg heavily, you go way plus. The issue, of course, is that you're still doing 6 damage to yourself, and the game is going pretty fast as a result. But it is a really cool card. There have been some ways to play it that make it strong, such as introducing threats that your opponent cannot deal with. But all things considered, it's mostly a gimmick card.
Yep. And my contribution is fish observation. Woo!
This is interesting. We've had a card that like skips the opponent's turn. We've had a card that skips one of our turns and gets all the resources, and now we have a card that skips our attack phase.
Yeah, you
There's
just
a
it's a
reason they've
one
never
zero
printed this
event.
before.
Draw
Yeah,
two,
you
then stock charge two, and then end your turn. Obviously after you've played all your cards, but like
the unspoken thing here is that if you don't field cards, you're actually going massively plus, because if you're not getting an attack phase anyway, why would you attack, right? So you're going way up in cards, but you are losing the damage and you're losing 1 stock, which is really it is relevant. It's all right. I think with those, look, there are heaps of other events we could talk about. There are some really good ones, some really bad ones, some really playable ones. We didn't even touch on Angel Beats, like Operation Tornado defined an era of Rice. We haven't talked about all of the decks that use anti-change counters properly. We haven't talked about the hexproof events. We didn't talk about, I don't think we need to talk about it, but what's the Monogatari event that is specifically exiles all hexproof characters?
Oh,
Yeah. I've forgotten what it's called
I
because it's
me too.
unplayable. It is Kuriyami, right? Yeah. Uh, there are lots of cards we could talk about, but we'll leave it there because events, at the end of the day, the most important part of an event is that it is design space that can't be used for characters. Like Tom said, the reason My Little Shido can exist is because it's an event and not a character. The reason why we can get cards as strong as Execution is because it's not a character. And the reason why a lot of people uh, feel that some decks are strong is because of these events and because a lot of them are very unique. So all in all, it's an important place to have design in White Schwartz. They may not be very strong, as Tom alluded to earlier. Events kind of just suck, but some of them are really, really good, and some of them are really, really powerful. So, let us know your favorite events. Have you played decks with many events? I think the record that I've seen is someone posted like a 26 event IMAS deck once.
Ugh.
Uh, I don't think they're good, but they're funny.
It's like that one guy who
Uh,
made the Sao deck with no level zeros.
I mean, that deck actually had relevance in that
Ugh,
it was meant
dude.
to farm Marker Asuna, so
Dude.
bad players would lose to it. But
Ugh.
no, I don't consider that to be a particularly worthwhile strategy. So yeah, let us know your favorite events, your favorite event-based decks. Dunmarch is the best one, but I'm sure there are heaps out there. And do the social stuff. Let us know. We've got other cool stuff prepared for everyone as well. So please stay tuned and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon. Do you have anything else you want to talk about, Tom?
No. Um.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks
No.
everyone
That's
for
it. Yeah.
listening. It's, uh, it's, it's always good, always a good time. So thanks everyone again. We'll see you for our next episode and peace
I'm gonna go make fun of Mushoku players.
as you do.